Torrential rain has caused severe flooding in southern areas of Thailand. At least 18 people have been killed and 1 million affected as thousands of villages remain partially submerged. The country's meteorological department has issued a warning for further flash flooding, and military personnel have been mobilized to help evacuate victims. The downpours have hit the country during the peak tourist season and have caused widespread disruption to flights and local public transport.
More areas are under signal number 1 as tropical depression moves closer to land. Surigao del Sur, where Aureng is expected to make landfall tonight or tomorrow morning, is under signal number 1. Landslides due to the non-stop rains have hit Agusan del Norte, leaving several villages isolated in Habonga town. Clearing operations are underway, but the Provincial Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council advises motorists not to proceed with travel just yet, as the national road is still impassable. Rising waters in major rivers are also under close watch, although the PDRRMC of Agusan del Norte says levels are not yet that critical.
Jeżeli chodzi o statystykę wypadków w ruchu drogowym, bo za ostatnią dobę zanotowaliśmy 21 wypadków drogowych, w których życie straciły 4 osoby, a 27 osób zostało rannych. Poza tym prowadzimy wspólne patrole. Są to patrole w takich miejscach, o których wiemy albo podejrzewamy, że mogą tam przebywać osoby bezdomne. Rozmawiamy z nimi, udzielamy im pomocy. Czasem odwozimy do domu, odwozimy do ich wytrzeźwień, do noclegowni, w zależności od sytuacji.
Well, here's something you don't see every day. A spectacular event may be getting ready to happen in Antarctica. Scientists are watching a huge iceberg that's poised to break off from the ice shelf. The iceberg would be almost the size, get this, of the state of Delaware. If it breaks away, it would be one of the largest icebergs ever recorded. The iceberg is connected to a much larger sheet of ice known as the Larsen C ice shelf. If the iceberg breaks off, it could destabilize the wider ice shelf. Now, scientists have monitored the condition of ice in Antarctica for decades, and they're making their latest assessment based on a growing crack in the ice shelf. It's natural for icebergs to break off or calve, so it's unclear what's happening, if it's linked to climate change. It could be, but that would be difficult to prove.
Nearly 2,000 people have died in a cold wave across Europe during the past 2 days. At 10 of the victims died in Poland. Others, among the refugees and the homeless, were found in Italy, Bulgaria, and Russia's St. Petersburg. The toll is expected to rise. Meanwhile, Russia has celebrated the coldest Orthodox Christmas in 120 years. Turkey and Greece likewise have seen fierce cold weather this past week. Hundreds of flights are canceled in Turkey's Istanbul on Saturday. The coldest temperature in Europe so far this winter was recorded on Friday in the Swiss village of La Brevine at minus 29.9 degrees Celsius. Now, the village's record of the coldest temperature ever was minus 40 degrees back in 1987.
Closer to home now, a rescue north of the valley. 3 people stranded on the roof of an SUV. Copper Canyon Fire says the SUV was pushed downstream on Beaver Creek by heavy runoff from the mountains. You can see all the water there. The SUV was lodged between 2 small trees. Crews were able to bring the 3 to safety without being hurt. Just incredible watching that rescue on camera. It happened yesterday. 3 were checked out by the Verde Valley Fire and refused further medical treatment.
All they've told us from the airline is that the airport is closed and that we'll be here indefinitely.
People from my plane were some of the victims. We were my wife and I have a 2-year-old and 3-year-old, so we let everybody get off the plane before we left, and so we were walking up the ramp, and we had just passed the check-in gate when all of a sudden everybody just started running. I grabbed our kids and we took off running down the ramp. Told the flight attendant to let us off the tarmac, and we ran out onto the tarmac to hide behind some luggage carts.
Tragedy and horror at a Florida airport, still shut down tonight. An active crime scene after a lone gunman began executing strangers at random in baggage claim. Tonight, we have new details on the suspect, his military background, his possible motives, and the potentially deadly intersection of mental illness and guns. A scene of pandemonium.
There's shots fired in this building.
And horror. Just moments after a lone gunman opened fire in the baggage claim area at Fort Lauderdale Airport.
Everybody stay down.
Shortly before 1 p.m. today, we had an active shooter inside Terminal 2, the lower level by baggage. The active shooter shot at least 13 people. 8 people, as I know right now, are in area hospitals being treated. I don't know the degree of their injuries. 5 people have succumbed to their wounds and tragically are dead.
Hundreds running in terror.
People started yelling and screaming, frantically running towards any door exit to get out of there.
The police coming and saying, get down, everybody stay down.
Tonight, law enforcement searching for answers.
The citizens of Florida will not tolerate senseless acts of evil. You just can't imagine how this would ever happen in a state like ours.
The terrifying ordeal began this afternoon. Authorities say the suspected shooter arrived at Fort Lauderdale Airport from Alaska, traveling like any other passenger. He allegedly took out a semi-automatic handgun from his checked luggage, loaded it in the bathroom, and began his cold-blooded killing spree. Bodies were struck down amongst the baggage. Still in shock, this woman describing what she saw.
Flying all around us.
I had a perfect picture of him coming and walking up and down, shooting the people. I mean, I just can't believe that was possible.
It was very scary because you didn't know if you were going to get shot.
He went towards the right, so going towards Carousel 2 and 3, and just started randomly shooting people at will. I mean, no rhyme, no reason. A gentleman with his 2 boys, he got shot in the wrist. There's a lady, her husband was one of them that was killed here, was shot in the head.
Nigel Nelson was going through the TSA checkpoint when he says he heard gunfire.
Just about to step through when we heard the shots fire and actually heard people screaming and running towards me. They opened all the gates and told us to run through. They were screaming, run, 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 the security people. They're shooting, just run, run, leave everything, go.
Some passengers in a state of panic, running across the tarmac to safety. Others sheltering in place.
Everybody ducked down and was on the ground. We made shields with the tables that we had. A group led us to hide in the kitchen of that food court restaurant, like a deli.
Local authorities responding to the scene within minutes, as witnesses say the suspect continued his rampage till he put the gun down, laid down spread eagle to surrender.
One shooter possibly detained at this time with multiple victims.
The suspect, who was carrying a military ID, is now known as 26-year-old Esteban Santiago. This photo, taken by eyewitness Mark Lee, shows him being led away by law enforcement.
I just remember seeing his face and thinking, wow, he looked so young. He just had this blank stare, just kind of really just no emotion.
Despite the quick action of police, the suspected shooter had already taken the lives of 5, injured at least 8 others.
This is a 26-year-old Army veteran with a very troubled life. And the more the FBI looks into his background, the more concerned they are.
Born in New Jersey but raised in Puerto Rico, Esteban Santiago's Instagram account shows a young man proudly in uniform, a member of the Army National Guard, serving in both Puerto Rico and Alaska. He was even deployed to Iraq. But then 4 months ago, he was discharged without ever rising above the rank of private first class.
That's a sign of a bad soldier. He never rose through the ranks, as most members of the military would over the course of a decade.
And a deeper look into Santiago's social media is raising concerns. His profile statement reads, "Here's to finding whether or not your mission on Earth is finished. If you're still alive, it isn't." And then at some point last year, Santiago made himself known to the FBI.
Santiago actually showed up at the FBI office in Anchorage, Alaska, complaining to agents that the government, the U.S. government, was forcing him to watch ISIS videos. Agents at the time thought he was incoherent, barely understandable, and they actually used the law to have him committed for a mental evaluation.
A 25-page version of the report says President Putin ordered a Russian cyber warfare campaign to influence the U.S. presidential election. The U.S. Director of National Intelligence and the heads of the CIA and FBI were in New York Friday to present to President-elect Donald Trump a longer classified version of the investigation that concludes Russia tried to hack the election to swing it Trump's way. After the briefing, Trump acknowledged cyber warfare is a big problem for the U.S. Whether it's our government, organizations, associations or businesses, we need to aggressively combat and stop cyber attacks. But Trump also insisted the alleged Russian hacks had, quote, absolutely no effect on his election victory. Earlier on Friday, he told the New York Times newspaper that the focus on Russian hacking is a political witch hunt. Trump's stance on the alleged Russian hacking puts him at odds with the rival Democratic Party, whose candidate Hillary Clinton he beat in November's election. It also pits him against many members of his own Republican Party.
Time to be an adult. You're president. You got to do something. Show us what you have.
Trump says he knows more about the hacking than even the intelligence agencies do, but outgoing Vice President Joe Biden said on U.S. public television, if that's true, Trump needs to put up or shut up.
There is no evidence that they actually tamper with voting booths or tamper with voting rolls, but there is clear evidence that they, in fact, were engaged in activities designed to try to impact on the outcome of the election.
In his statement released Friday afternoon, Trump said he'll appoint a team to come up with a cyber defense plan within 90 days of taking office. After he's sworn in, Trump says he'll make U.S. security his #1 priority. John Terrett, CGTN, New York.
Russia's only aircraft carrier has set sail for home from the eastern Mediterranean Sea. Bombers launched from the Admiral Kuznetsov off the coast of Syria helped government forces defeat rebels in Aleppo. The victory last month was followed by President Vladimir Putin announcing that Russian forces would begin withdrawing. The Defense Ministry says the aircraft carrier strike group accomplished its mission by destroying more than 1,200 terrorist targets.
I would like to note that naval personnel deployment in the operation against terror groups allowed us to liberate Syria's economic capital, Aleppo, from the rebels in the shortest possible time.
The aircraft carrier departs while a fragile ceasefire is in place. The truce was negotiated last month between Russia, Turkey, and Iran. The Russia-Syria coalition is now focusing on combating ISIL, which is not part of the ceasefire agreement. A military analyst told me 6,000 Russian troops remain in Syria to fortify government forces.
On Friday, Donald Trump confirmed that the United States will initially pay for a border wall with Mexico and be reimbursed at a later date. The proposed U.S.-Mexico border wall was one of the president-elect's key campaign pledges, and he has repeatedly vowed to make Mexico pay for it. Trump also did not specify in a tweet Friday morning whether his administration would seek to build the wall with taxpayer money. According to the Associated Press, Trump's aides are currently pushing for a plan that would seek the funds through existing legislation, such as the Secure Fence Act of 2006, which already authorizes some types of enclosures along the U.S.'s southern border.
Es bleibt letztlich dabei, ja, es gibt erste Gesprächskontakte, Herr Jung, aber so ein richtig klares, kohärentes und gerade mal umfassendes Bild dessen, was eine neue Trump-Administration in der Außen- und Sicherheitspolitik mit sich und der Welt anfangen will, ist dabei auch noch nicht entstanden.
Eine rückwirkende Neukontrolle aller eingereisten Flüchtlinge sei möglich.
A transgender man is suing a Catholic hospital for refusing to perform an operation that was part of a sex change. John A. Conforti filing a discrimination lawsuit against St. Joseph's Medical Center in New Jersey for refusing to perform a hysterectomy. The hospital citing religious reasons. Even though he had the procedure done at a different hospital, Conforti is still suing. He says he doesn't want anyone to go through what he did.
For ambulance crews across England, this is one of the busiest times of the year. But with greater demand being put on accident and emergency departments, the British Red Cross says its volunteers are helping transport patients home in many areas. And it's warning there's what it calls a humanitarian crisis in public hospitals.
We see in our work every day our volunteers supporting people to come out home from hospital or helping prevent admission to hospitals, increasingly chaotic situations where someone might be discharged from hospital without the right preparation, even cases where someone discharged without clothing.
New National Health Service figures show last week 42 A&E departments ordered ambulances to divert to other hospitals, double the number during the same period in 2015. And last month, 50 of the 152 NHS hospital trusts in England had to declare an alert because they couldn't cope with the number of people seeking medical attention. NHS bosses reject talk of a humanitarian crisis and say most hospitals do have adequate plans for this winter.
The NHS is not in crisis. We have a very comprehensive escalation plan which uses the whole of the local economy, for the local authority, for the hospitals, for the ambulance service, for GPs, to step up when the hospitals get into difficulty. And the diversion that you talk about is part of that escalation plan.
But in many cases, patients are still being kept in hospital when they should be discharged. The social care they need isn't available because of government spending cuts.
Lo que yo no me fijé.
Sí, trae peluca.
Oye, lo que yo no me fijé.
Trae en la mano algo.
No trae, no trae ligón.
Él sabía que ya sería de gimnasio.
Sí.
O alguien adentro. O alguien. La pistola la trae en la bolsa.
Sí, ahí.
Ahí es cuando ocurre. Ahí.
Investigators are looking into reports that lawmakers here in our state may have been recently hacked. An email went out to the legislature saying it happened when lawmakers and staff clicked on a link asking them to reset those passwords. They then received a screen with Russian writing. The Arizona Department of Administration has shut down the external access system until that problem is addressed fully.
We've heard rumblings about the precarious Mosul Dam over the past 2 years, but did you know that it's the most unsafe in the world? And experts say it could collapse any day. It would unleash a tsunami-like tidal wave, which would rush down the Tigris within hours. Mosul, still under ISIS control, would be submerged within days. Tikrit and Baghdad, too. Millions could die. Shockingly, there is major disagreement about how serious the issue is and what should be done. So joining me now is the New Yorker's Dexter Filkins, who's just visited the dam, and he's written a major report on what he found there. Dexter, welcome to the program. I mean, this is truly one of those natural disaster movies in the making, but it's real.
Yes.
It's real.
Yes,
and we've been
it
reporting it for a long time, but this is the most in-depth that I've seen. So just play for us the catastrophe if it should break. What is it going to look like?
It's pretty crazy. You know, you have this enormous dam. It's like 2 miles wide, 400 feet high, and behind it, the reservoir has 11 billion cubic meters of water. So it's an enormous lake. If the dam breaks, and the fears are pretty high that it will, you have this enormous, essentially a tsunami that rolls down the Tigris more than 100 miles, essentially flooding everything in its path. Mosul, a city of 2 million people, would be under about 80 feet of water in an hour. And so that's just no time to evacuate. It would sweep all the cities before it, and it would arrive in Baghdad after about 3 days. Baghdad would be under, at a minimum, 16 feet of water, which is enough to flood most of the buildings in that city. That's a city of 6 million people. The international airport would be flooded. Therefore, no planes would be able to get in to mount a relief effort. So when they did the computer models on this stuff and kind of factored in, you know, how quickly people could evacuate, the estimates are like astounding. They're like anywhere from 1 million people to 1.5 million people could die.
Wow.
In the flood.
Wow.
And it's incredible. And I think what...
Yeah,
go ahead, sorry.
No, sorry. I mean, yes, those people could die, but what about the survivors? You say that because of the airport could be flooded, couldn't even get in humanitarian aid or any life-saving methods.
Yeah, it's really that. Somebody I was interviewing said to me, he said, "Okay, like we have a lot of dead people, but what about everybody else? You know, how do you feed, say, take Baghdad? How do you feed 6 million people when it's under 15 feet of water and the airport's closed?" Okay. And so, yeah, there's a lot of A lot of worry out there.
Can we just give us the reason why it's so dangerous? Okay, it was built under Saddam, and it's all about the rock,
Yes.
isn't it? The quality of the rock, which seems to be dissolving, on which it's built.
Yes. Yeah, it's a beautifully constructed dam, and it's in the wrong place, and so it's, yeah, as you said, it's sitting on a bed of soluble rock, and so the rock, when it comes in contact with water, starts to dissolve, and that, you can see that's like really dangerous. And so from the minute the dam was finished in 1984, more than 30 years ago, there have been teams, hundreds of people have been working at the bottom of the dam, pumping in tens of thousands of tons of cement and concrete underneath the dam as these caverns open up underneath it. And they work around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for more than 30 years to basically stave off the collapse of the dam. And they've kind of done it. There's been a great deterioration over the years, but the big turning point came when ISIS seized the dam in 2014.
And what does that mean?
Basically,
did they stop pumping that stuff in? I mean, what did it mean?
Yes. Well, ISIS only held the dam for like a week, and then the Kurdish militia came in and kicked them out. But it was enough that the whole staff that works at the dam, and that's 1,500 people who are doing this kind of constant, what they call grouting, pumping cement into the ground, everybody left. And it's really hard to get a straight answer. I spent a lot of time trying to get a straight answer from Iraqi officials, from American officials, on how long the dam went without any work being done there. And so that, the water keeps washing the foundation away. And I think at a minimum it was 4 months. And so I got a hold of some documents that were classified. And you can see that the Americans went in after they took the dam, after they retook the dam, and they started looking at the dam, and they're horrified. They thought, oh my God, like this thing is gonna go. And what the crucial thing, what's happened over the past couple of years since ISIS had the dam, was it's basically started to move, and it's moved 4 times since then. And
Whoa.
that, the implication is that because the ground is moving underneath.
Yeah. And one of the people who you quote says it's like a nuclear bomb with an unpredictable fuse, and it could happen anytime. But here's the thing, Dexter, which I find just traumatic. You've got several different views on this. One of the directors of the dam, from your article, says, sure, we have problems, but the Americans are exaggerating. This dam is not going to collapse. Everything is going to be fine. And then we have another engineer, the former Mosul Dam engineer, who's now in Sweden, who said this to us, last year. Listen to what he said.
Sooner or later, the dam will be destroyed, in fact, because once the cavities underneath the foundation are so big that they can't hold the weight of the dam, then the dam failure will be within minutes.
So which is it? I mean, if you can't get a consensus on the danger and the imminence, how is it going to be fixed?
Well, I really, what's happened is, behind the scenes, it's a very strange situation, as you point out. You have the director of the dam. He's been there his whole life, and honestly, I think it's a matter of pride. So he says, everything is fine, and meanwhile, like behind him, like everybody is panicking. And no one wants to say anything publicly because they don't want to embarrass him. So you have the Iraqi government, which is utterly dysfunctional, on a good day, and they essentially refuse to say publicly that the dam is in danger. But then you have all the engineers, and you have the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who every time they take a measurement there, they're like, oh my God, we got to get to work here. So the work is happening. Right. They flew in these.
Sorry.
Yes.
Oh, sorry to interrupt you. Very briefly, would there be any fair warning, or would it just go?
I think if the dam, someone said to me, you'll hear a crack, and then the dam will go. In 12 hours, it would be gone. It would disintegrate that quickly.